This is the weekend edition of Fear and Greed Business News, Australia's best business podcast. I'm Michael Thompson, and Sean Aylmer is still away. He's very nearly back. But in the meantime, of course, we have Jennifer Duke joining us. Jen, good morning.
Good morning, Michael.
Now, the weekend show, very different to the weekday show. We've made it through the week. Now we get to the weekend, and this is where we each nominate what we think is the biggest story of the week and the most remarkable story and a sleeper story, one that's kind of flying under the radar a little bit, or one that I think, in my particular case, I know I'm getting ahead of myself, one that's going to become a bigger story further down the track. We also pick out our favourite story, and we need a judge. We need an adjudicator, someone who can settle it once and for all, make a decision. Our Fear and Greed colleague, Adam Lang. Adam, good morning.
Good morning, Michael.
Are you feeling fair today, Adam?
I'm feeling just.
I don't know whether just really comes into it. Your criteria are very variable, and they do seem to apply oddly at times. But shall we jump in?
Yeah,
I'm ready.
Now, I think last week, Jen, you had a win, didn't you? You won overall.
I did. So I'm hoping that I'm going to continue my winning streak this time. We'll see.
A winning streak? Is that you've won once?
It's already a streak with one win. Yeah, I'm an optimist.
I love the optimism. Shall I go first for the biggest story?
Okay, I went first last time, so I think that's only fair.
Okay. Well, I think
or just.
Yeah, it is just, isn't it? It's righteous. I'll go first for the bigger story because there is only one bigger story in Australia this week. And actually, I feel bad. Remember in debating in high school about how you weren't allowed to deny the opposition a debate by saying there is no kind of competition in this topic? I am denying you a debate here because there is no competition in this. There is only one bigger story in Australia this week. People aren't talking about the economy. They're not talking about reporting season. They're not talking about politics. They're not talking about anything like that. They weren't wearing calculators and spreadsheets into work this week. They were wearing green and gold because the biggest story this week was quite simply the Matildas. And there's a lot in this. They might have lost the semi-final to England, but they did the following. I've put together a little list for you. And so, Adam, get your pen ready because this is a comprehensive list of why the Matildas are the biggest story of the week. They smashed TV records. They got more than 7 million people watching just on the semi-final alone, and that the TV audiences have been growing week after week after week. They got the entire country excited about football, regardless of their traditional code allegiances. They've changed the story forever about women's sport in Australia. They've inspired a generation, maybe more than one generation. They've put pressure on businesses now to back women's sport if those businesses want to be seen and want to be part of the future of sport. They've put even more pressure on all sporting codes to realise the enormous potential of women's sport and for then the money to flow accordingly. They did all of those things, and above all of that, they just gave us a really good time. I don't know anybody who did not enjoy watching what has happened over the last few weeks and watching this week. What an extraordinary World Cup. Biggest sporting story of the year, biggest story of the week by far, and a very brief entry for me, which is actually quite unusual. Jen, would you like to add anything to my entry or even put your own entry into the category?
Oh, look, it is actually really painful that you've got the Matildas as yours because I don't disagree that's what everyone was talking about. But I will happily butt in here and give Adam less time to think about your entry into the biggest story. Because mine, I feel like just because people weren't necessarily all gathering around the water cooler and talking about it, this is actually way more important. And so my biggest story of the week is National Cabinet and its housing outcome with the states and territories. So to summarise, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese met with the state and territory leaders. They came up with a big national planning reform blueprint that's including a new target of 1.2 million extra homes over the next 5 years. And one of our interviews on Fear and Greed over the week was with CoreLogic's head of research, Tim Lawless, and he said this could be a huge accomplishment, surpassing the levels that we normally build during boom time conditions. Not only that, but there were practical changes made for renters, including minimum standards for homes, nationally consistent no grounds eviction rules, and a limit of rent increases to once a year. So there are a few reasons that I'm picking this one. Firstly, it's going to deliver actual meaningful improvements to people's lives, not just like the Matildas who make us all happy for a bit of time. This will go on for a long, long while. And if it all goes ahead as described, that's especially the case for renters. And secondly, I think it's only the sign of things to come for the government's agreements with the states, particularly while we have wall-to-wall Labor governments on the mainland. Thirdly, you have to combine this with the Prime Minister's Help to Buy scheme for first home buyers. This is a shared equity scheme that was part of his election platform, and he finally announced that it's kicking in for 2024. So it's pretty obvious that federal Labor wants to be seen to be fixing the housing affordability mess. And this is the biggest story of the week because a main part of that issue is demand, including from investors, which so far hasn't actually been touched. So could this be the start of a more ambitious discussion about tax reform? And might we actually solve some of our most irritating property problems like stamp duty? There is so much potential here.
Oh, a part of me was just thinking, I reckon Jen might concede this category and just go, yeah, you won the bigger story.
I hope so. I was like, maybe I just steamroll you with facts. I mean, that's always helpful.
And then you went all in on this one. And the worst part is that anyone who knows this program and has listened knows that Adam is very passionate about certain topics. And one of those ones is tax reform. And then as soon as you just kind of just floated that one towards the end, it felt as though...
It's such a good topic. It's so important. And I know that Adam takes these very detailed notes while we do this. So I'm hoping that he got all of those points in there.
Oh, I'm sure he did.
Oh.
Go on, Adam.
Okay, so Jen, geez, so good, but I can't give it to you this week.
Oh.
There's two principal reasons. You certainly had me on all criteria, including you got a bonus point for throwing in tax reform. Just the mention of the words gives you a lift in my estimation. But the main one here is that I don't know, and Tim Lawless said this too in the interview you did with him, which was brilliant. How can they do it? They haven't actually got the plan to do it yet. They've announced the goals.
That is true. I was hoping you weren't going to say that.
They've announced the goals. They've got 5 years. It's not going to start till next year. It's like, okay, that's a big goal. Let's see if you can do it. And for that reason, I had to mark your second, Michael, the story this week. And as you defined it, and I believe this, the business of sport has changed. And this is a real turning point for all sport, not just women's sport or football. And it was magnificent. I think on top of that too, how the team have behaved in loss and success has been excellent role modelling. So I've loved it. Well done.
I feel like it was a little dishonourable of me to jump in and
steal it
and steal the Matildas first, knowing that it was probably a likely winner. Anyway, I'm not going to turn down the point. Thank you, Adam. That's 1-0. And we move on now to the most remarkable. Now, Jen, I went first in the first category. You go first in the second. What was your most remarkable story this week?
Sure. I'm still in politics this week. So to me, the most remarkable is the ongoing rift within the coalition at a federal and state level on the Indigenous voice to Parliament. So we all know that federal opposition leader Peter Dutton is opposed to constitutional change for the voice. But New South Wales Liberal leader Mark Speakman has revealed that he's going to vote yes. And he said this is his position because the potential rewards outweigh the risks. And it will go some way to dealing with one of Australia's biggest policy failures, which is poor outcomes for Indigenous Australians. And the New South Wales opposition isn't making it mandatory for state MPs to take a particular position, but it's interesting how much Speakman is at odds with Dutton, and he's actually in really good company. So the only Liberal Premier, which is Tasmania's Jeremy Rockcliffe, is also supporting the voice, as is ACT opposition leader Elizabeth Lee. And the federal picture is getting murkier and murkier. Dutton's been campaigning against enshrining the voice in the Constitution, describing it as risky, but saying he prefers a legislated voice instead, which would mean that governments can change it without going back to a national vote. But Nationals leader David Littleproud has been sceptical about this idea. Politics is messy at the best of times, but this really takes the cake right now.
Yeah, that is really messy, isn't it? And we knew that this was going to get ugly, and it just feels like it is deteriorating and deteriorating. That is a hard word to say, and I don't know why I attempted to say it 2 times in a row. Okay, I've got a good nomination, I think, for most remarkable story. No, it's not just a good nomination. It's a superior nomination. It's most remarkable story this week. I'm going to actually nominate reporting season. And Adam, I know that
the whole thing.
No, not the whole thing. I'm going to narrow it down a little bit.
Well, you are now.
goodness, the attitude from the two of you. It feels like I'm taking on not one competitor, but two, and those two are colluding against me.
Well, we have ruled out the so-called Aylmer, where you take a box lot of stories and put them all together. And that was kind of the Joseph intervention, as I recall it.
Yes. Yeah, that was when Sean kept on swooping in and saying the economy was the biggest story and then combining like 10 different stories all relating to the economy and making it impossible for me to win. I am not doing that. And I'm not even saying that the whole lot of reporting season is the most remarkable story. There have been some remarkable results, but that's not what I want to focus on this morning. What I think is remarkable, right, is the way that some of these results, they're not just numbers. And you can almost forget that a little bit when you hear there are so many companies reporting one after the other, and you just suddenly kind of get lost in this ocean of percentages and profits and dividends, etc. But the fact is that a lot of these results, if you have a good look at them, they're actually a story about what people are doing, the way behaviour is changing, and the way that Australians are coping with the cost of living crisis. These results, the ones I've been having a look at, they show real life trends. So we'll start with, look at Ingham's Group. So the country's largest poultry producer, increase in net profit to more than $60 million. Why? Because consumers are shifting towards cheaper cuts of meat, like chicken, to offset cost of living pressures. Super Retail Group, they own Rebel and BCF and Super Cheap Auto. The best performing category for the group, auto maintenance, DIY auto maintenance. People are shifting towards doing this at home, doing it themselves. It's cheaper. Treasury Wine Estates, 5.4% drop in earnings across the arm of the business that sells cheaper drops like Pepperjack and Lindeman's. Again, cost of living. Those who can least afford it are saving cash where they can. At the other end of the market, though, you see the demand for premium wine staying high. In fact, the Penfolds arm of the business had a 14.2% increase in earnings. So you get a very clear picture suddenly of those battling the cost of living against those who are more immune to those pressures. This ties then in with NAB, who are only seeing a small number of customers falling behind in their home loan repayments. Similar story with CBA and Bendigo and Adelaide Bank. Why? Because this is the last thing that people will fall behind on. They'll make other cuts first. They'll eat cheaper meat. They'll cut back on the wine. They'll do all of these things to keep a roof over their heads. You look below the surface of some of these results that we're hearing this season, this week, it tells a very, very human story. And I think that's pretty remarkable. Adam.
Also, Michael, remarkable was the fact that your preamble was as long as your story.
What? Just
a comment.
I thought I did a sterling job with that one, and I was expecting when I handed over to you, go, this would have been you, Adam. You would have said, that was a lot deeper than I was expecting, and I award you the point. Instead, just whack straight away, just criticising me for the length of the preamble. Please. Goodness me.
Okay.
Go on.
So I love Jen's story because it is there, but amongst all the other news of the week, it has been perhaps not getting the sort of profile you might expect. And I think the coalition is fracturing slowly in front of our eyes over this topic in particular. So I think it's a great, remarkable story. Michael, I think as you said, well done. You went deeper than I think, and you win for this story of the week.
Oh, no.
No, it's not over yet, Jen. I have been down 2-0 many times going into the halftime. I've never actually won from that position, but
Is this how the Tillies felt, do you reckon?
yes, exactly right.
I'm like upsetting the nation right now with my lost streak. That's me. See, now I'm in the pessimism camp.
I love that you think the nation is behind you. I'm the man of the people. They're behind me. I'm sorry, Jen. Okay, 2-0.
Oh.
You need a very short break to regroup. Just treat this as kind of halftime. Imagine yourself getting a big pep talk during halftime, and we'll come back in a second and find a sleeper story of the week. All right, we're looking for a sleeper story now. So, Jen, the sleeper story is maybe one that's not getting the attention that we think it deserves. So it's very subjective, or one that's going to become a bigger story further down the track that we're only just seeing it kind of get started now. All right, I think it's my turn to go first on this one. And I say that without a great deal of confidence. I loathe this category because it is really hard to find a sleeper story, just because by its very nature, if we've covered it on fear and greed, we are giving it attention. So anyway, putting all my ideological kind of issues with this category to one side, I've tried many a time to get AI stories across the line in this show. I've even tried in this particular category, the sleeper category. And from memory, I don't think it was successful. But I will not let failure stop me. I refuse to learn the lessons of the past. My sleeper story today is about artificial intelligence. Even as I say it, I'm just like, oh, just stop.
I feel a win might be coming my way.
See, it's not, because I'm not talking about the whole concept of AI. I'm pretty sure, just got a little hunch that ship has sailed and it probably wouldn't be considered a sleeper story anymore. The reason why I think this is there's an element to this that's a sleeper, because at a time when everyone is calling for greater regulation of AI, you see it coming out of the US, it's been happening now in Australia as well. A model for regulation has actually emerged from within the midst of the tech community, and it deserves a lot more attention than what it's been getting. And I'm predicting that it may well get that attention, making it a sleeper story. Atlassian, which is a good homegrown software giant, wants the government to force companies to tell people when they're talking to AI. This is obviously targeting things like chatbots. And Atlassian thinks people have the right to know if they're talking to a computer who sounds like a real person. That is a very, very good start. And it feels like that is just laying the foundation for kind of future reform. They also think it should be disclosed to people if AI is making decisions that have a material impact on them, that really do affect them. Absolutely. Makes sense. They're proposing as well a traffic light system to deal with AI-related challenges. Red would be for risks and harms, according to the Financial Review, risks and harms not covered by legislation. Amber, where the threat of harms are unclear, and green for issues where there's already laws in place. I'm no AI expert. You would think I'm an AI expert for the number of times that I've tried to get it up in this show. But all of this sounds pretty reasonable, pretty clear to me. We haven't heard a lot about this proposal from Atlassian, but considering the government has actually been calling for submissions and Atlassian has a little bit of weight behind it, a fair bit of experience in the tech space, maybe, just maybe, we're going to be seeing a bit more of this particular idea, and the fact that this has just emerged from within the tech community itself saying this is how we think this should be regulated, then I think this is the sleeper story that's not getting the attention that it deserves. And I Adam, Jen, I invite you both right now, just close your eyes and just take just sniff, go. Do you smell that? It smells like a sleeper story. It smells like victory.
Oh, dear.
I actually think that's a good one, to be honest. Am I already...
I don't care now what Adam says.
I love an
What have you got
Atlassian
for
story.
us?
It's just interesting. Well, look, as much as I think that your AI story is interesting, the biggest sleeper story right now is actually what's happening to the Aussie dollar. So there have been some pretty awful economic data out of China and broader signals of problems, which is including their decision not to publish their unemployment rate for young people after it hit a record high. And there's been a mass sell-off of Chinese equities by foreign investors due to concerns about the world's second largest economy. So if you combine this with weaker than expected jobs data in Australia this week, and our currency sell-off has begun. All of this has led Commonwealth Bank of Australia experts to warn that the Aussie dollar could fall below US 60 cents. This is a level that hasn't been seen since 2020 ahead of the pandemic, and the Aussie dollar already sank to 9-month lows over the week, so it's clearly on a downward trajectory. Now, the reason this is the sleeper story for me is that these are the invisible forces around us that have huge ramifications for businesses and households. A weak Aussie dollar makes it super expensive to import goods, driving up prices and pushing up inflation. We're already in a cost of living crisis, and this week we've seen petrol prices push up again to year highs. This is also at a time when our central bank says we're on a narrow path to being able to balance cooling, but not crashing the economy with bringing down inflation. an extra rate hike from any lingeringly high inflation would put many borrowers in a lot of pain and would add downward pressure to the economy at a time our major trading partner is flagging. For the ramifications for all Australian businesses and households right now, this is the sleeper story to watch.
Oh, Jen, magnificent.
But there was no sniff test at the end.
There's no sniff test. Okay, close your eyes.
Nope, doesn't smell
There
like
we
a
go.
sleeper story to me. No.
No,
Smells fragrant and delightful. Nope, no sleeper.
it smells magnificent.
The only way I think you could have done better is Sean Aylmer-like really injected some more vested interest, some self-interest into that story.
I'm not going anywhere on holiday, unfortunately.
Not like Sean.
Ah,
No. So, Jen, you win for Sleeper Story of the Week. This is massive, absolutely massive. And, I mean, in recent weeks, we've seen the Aussie dollar hit such lows. It is expensive doing business overseas right now. And I just hope that can stop, but I don't see when it's going to. So I think that sleeper story is going to be around for a while. Michael, your very good sleeper story, actually, when you narrowed it down from AI to Atlassian and the traffic light system. I'm wondering too, though, this is a question without notice, if you think this traffic light system could be applied not just to AIs, but to humans. Now, for example, in social media, the anonymity of social media leads to trolling, right?
Mhm.
Because there are no consequences for people you don't know and can't find.
Mhm.
But if there was a similar system for humans and AI, do you think that would have merit?
If it'll help me get a couple of extra points, then absolutely I agree with you, Adam.
It doesn't, because you omitted it entirely.
Yeah, in the past you've added things onto my stories to help me get a few points.
Jen wins.
That's fair. All right, 2-1.
Now, Michael, can I give you the analogy that I'm seeing right now in my mind?
Oh, please do. Yep.
Okay, so you said earlier to embrace the dark side of the Force, like a Sith Lord. I'm seeing, Jen, like Kathy Freeman rounding the straight in the 400, streaking home and gaining on you in this last story of the week.
Oh,
that's a lot of pressure to put on Michael.
A Sith Lord versus Kathy Freeman.
it feels a little bit like you're biased right now, Adam. No one's going to be rooting for the dark side of the Force here compared to Kathy Freeman. God, okay. I will suggest, Jen, that you go first in this one for the favourite story of the week.
Sure, I can do that. Now that I'm back on my winning streak. My favourite story of the week has got to be the vast improvement in our national gender pay gap. It's now the smallest that it has ever been. Usually the news is filled with stories about worsening equality. So this one is a really great change, and it shows what progress can be made in Australia's business landscape in a relatively short period of time. So the Workplace Gender Equality Agency, which is tasked with improving these outcomes, unveiled the narrowest pay gap on record in Australia this week at 13%. That's a 0.3 percentage point improvement on February. And yes, women still only earn 87 cents to every dollar that a man makes, but this is a huge step up. And what was even more exciting about these figures to me is that some of the improvement has been driven by the rising incomes of women in traditionally female-dominated industries. Often the proposed solution to the gap has been for women to join the blokes in higher paid jobs like finance and tech, rather than for everyone to just properly value the industries that women work in. This data shows a rise in pay in education and training, healthcare and social assistance. Now, it is from May, so it doesn't reflect all the increases for sectors like aged care either. The Equality Agency CEO, Mary Woolridge, isn't ready for us to rest on our laurels quite yet. She says the gender pay gap has increased in some industries. But from 2024, organisations with 100 or more employees will have their gender pay gap on the public record, and that will help drive change even more. So yes, there's still more work to be done here, but regardless, I think that deserves the favourite of the week.
That's a good story. And it actually feels quite shallow of me to go from you talking about the national gender pay gap to me talking about a story about planes.
Well, that is a surprise.
Yeah, indeed. It is entirely unsurprising that any story about planes is going to be my favourite of the week. I'm going to nominate it anyway because this one is an absolute cracker, and it's great because it kind of combines planes and politics and the global economy and everything all into one. It's got, Adam, I know you got your criteria there. So if you just kind of tick, 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 all of the boxes down there. And the only thing that is missing from this is melodrama from this story. So anyway.
Are you going to bring some?
No. I'm going to deliver this very, very just plainly and simply. So anyway. So I'm talking about Germany's Foreign Minister, Annalena Baerbock, who was on her way to Australia. She was coming down here. She had some meetings. She had speeches. She was going to see the Matildas play. She was going to go to Fiji. She was going to go to New Zealand. But she couldn't because her plane broke down in Abu Dhabi. That's where they had to stop. They had to do an emergency landing. They had to dump fuel. They had to land. And then they got stuck there on the tarmac in Abu Dhabi. Don't you think that is just ridiculous? The foreign minister of the world's fourth largest economy, the largest in Europe, no shortage of cash, had to cut 3 countries off her itinerary because her plane broke down. Think of the trade kind of repercussions, the trade talks, the national security discussions. Think of the diplomacy, all stuck there on the tarmac. But to be fair, I suppose we should probably cut her some slack because these things happen. There's no warning, nothing to say that particular plane was a bit dodgy, right? Wrong. The same plane, the very same plane broke down in 2018. On that occasion, it was Chancellor Angela Merkel who missed the opening of the G20 summit, more diplomatic damage. And then for this later situation with the foreign minister, apparently they tried to get onto commercial flights, couldn't work it all out within the schedule. Instead, the solution was just cancel the whole trip. One piece of good news, though, that came out of this. The Germans have learnt their lesson. Because of this whole debacle, that particular A340 is being retired immediately. They've got another matching one as well. That one's being punted as well. After 23 years of this plane, it's time for an upgrade. Took a while. So much for German efficiency. My favourite story by far this week. Adam, are you with me?
Before Adam jumps in to make his decision, before you do, can I just say that telephones do exist, so I completely take exception this will affect trade talks and national security discussions, and I love your melodrama, but I feel like you need a point deducted for that.
There's no melodrama.
I'm hopeful. I'm so hopeful. Am I joining the dark side with tactics here?
That story, that was just the facts. There was no melodrama in that. And we all know that when it comes to diplomacy and kind of detailed discussions, nothing beats a face-to-face meeting, does it? That's why Zoom demanded everybody goes back into the office because they can get more done in person. So I hear you, Jen. I entirely reject your claims, and I hereby restore the point that you just stripped from me. Adam.
And we'll hand to the voice of justice.
Very good debate. And clearly the competitive tension is high.
No.
Isn't that great?
No. We're cool. We're cool.
Okay. In the great 400 race of the Sith Lord, Michael, versus Jennifer Duke as Kathy Freeman. This one is coming right down to the finish. So, Michael, I loved your introduction where you're just going to let the facts do the talking. Your plain story, told plainly. Very good.
Did I make that pun at some point unintentionally? Or
no.
It was you? Oh, well done. Then I say you deserve a point for that one, Adam.
Bit of a bad pun, but I'll take it. But Jen, your story on worthiness alone is just massive. And as I do it through the criteria of topicality, timeliness, economic impact, subjective bias, and melodrama, I've given you maximum points on this one, including economic impact. It's still an indictment that we're 13% apart in our pay for men and women, but that it's improving and being monitored and measured so regularly is just great. So I've given you the win for this story of the week.
Thank you very much. I'll take that win. You're closing the points gap, even if we can't close the pay gap. So there you go. I didn't even plan that pun.
Very good.
Oh, well played, Jen.
That's terrible. I can feel everyone groaning at me.
Oh, no. This is the thing. This is a very safe environment for making terrible, terrible jokes. There's never any criticism for anything like that. Adam, we need to, so it's 2-2. We need to
2-2 on the story count. I'm just doing the count back to make double, triple sure.
We need to go to the points. And this is the thing that, for context, Jen, that Adam does, it's all, I mean, just look at his sheet there. It is all done by hand, and there's the handwritten notes, and we get kind of
so
points.
It is so much more detailed.
Yeah, and it's all done in pen, and there are points allocated for every category, and within that, there's like 5 different criteria. So there's a lot of adding up to do. So I'm padding while Adam adds. Adam, what's the result?
Thank you. 2 stories each. I added up that one pretty quickly. Michael.
Oh, dear.
Really good score.
Oh, no.
92 points.
Oh, no.
Ooh.
Jen, you may have set a record.
No.
96 points.
I'm just going to bask in this for a second. I'm really enjoying this feeling of winning. I was going to say I need a win, or I might not come back ever again when Sean's back.
So, Michael, your second half, much like the Matildas, was full of defensive errors.
What?
The AI story is a sleeper.
Oh.
And a plain story for your favourite again.
We probably need a funniest story of the week category, in fairness, because that one gave me plenty of laughs.
I tell one?
Yeah, go on.
I've got
Yes.
one just off the cuff.
Yeah.
So I will include this as my favourite story of the week. And Jen, you reported on this, and I remember when we were recording it, we had a hard time keeping a straight face. So this was the utopia-like high farce of President Joe Biden, his deputy assistant Kurt Campbell, announcing that the USA would invest in technology to create a 3-way hotline between the US, Japan, and Korea. Now, the prospect of those 3 nations developing a 3-way hotline, I think, is just brilliant.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Although if I ever have to say 3-way hotline ever again...
You know what? I'm going to jump right in here and wrap things up quickly because it feels like we're getting into very, very dangerous territory.
Just reporting the news, Michael.
All right. So there we go. Congratulations, Jen. Good result. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And thank you, Adam.
Thank you, Michael.
Make sure you're following the podcast and join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was Fear and Greed Business News. Have a great weekend.